Coming up on today's episode of PSN, we have Tristan Lindberg from the Blind Hockey League to talk about the upcoming Carnegie Cup, as well as the development of the Blind Hockey League. And Nathan Clement talks about getting tested for doping. You won't want to miss it. Let's get started.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Welcome into Parasport Nation. I'm Alex Smyth. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Nathan Clement. Nathan, I teased it off the top there. You got tested for doping. Is there anything you need to tell us while we're starting off this show, or is this just a natural part of the process of being a high-performance athlete?
It's one of those things where I have guests come over all the time to see how I'm doing. But more or less, it's an important integral part of the sporting cycle as national team athletes and members that represent our country internationally. It's very important that we have these kinds of tests and these kinds of people come over at any times to see what we're up to.
And so how do you get notified, and when do you get notified that, you're going to be getting tested?
So there's numerous ways of being notified. Commonly in competition, usually after a race or after a game, dependent on your sport, you'll have someone who's a chaperone for the World Anti-Doping Agency or your sport federate, the International Sport Federation at that event, come notify you that, hey, you've been selected for doping. And usually there's a little card that you're given, a little pamphlet being like, okay, you're going to be tested. And then at that moment, as soon as you have that card given to you, that chaperone cannot let you out of their sight at all till you go see the doping control officer, usually in a room or a certain building separate from the race venue, or even inside the race venue or competition venue. And then even at games, for example, I've had teammates, as soon as we landed off the plane and as soon as we landed in the village, they've been notified that they immediately need to report to the doping hall, which is usually a room that has desks, tables, chairs, where athletes can sit down, but also a private area too, where they can use the washroom and do what they need to get tested. But outside of competitions or a games venue, it can happen at any time. So for example, I've been buying groceries and then all of a sudden I get a phone call being, hey, this is so-and-so from the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport. We're here to do a drug test. Or I've been at restaurants before, and usually when you're getting a phone call around 8 or 9 p.m. as an athlete, that isn't a scam call, that is a doping control call. So it can happen at any time. And most recently, this past weekend on Sunday, I was getting ready for my ride and I got a buzzer on my door, and this will happen to be doping control. So it can really happen at any time. And when you're not in competition or out of competition, as those tests are called, they can notify you by calling you, by knocking on your door, or your ringtone. So it can happen at any moment of the day. And
okay, so you got the buzz at the door. They were there to test you. What's the process from the time that they enter your place to the time they leave?
So firstly, you greet them, you welcome them in, because it's kind of one of those things like when the police are doing a search or a warrant, you can't say no. So as soon as you answer that call, you have to let them into your place. Usually you find a table, you find somewhere where people can put the items down, put the documents down, and then they go through a series of questions. They notify you, they let you know your rights that you have at the moment, where you can have a chaperone, especially if you're under the age of 18. You need to have a guardian with you when present. However, for myself being over 18, I can still get a chaperone or someone, but usually in this case, I'm okay as an adult on my own. So they'll go through a bunch of questions like that. They'll ask kind of what supplements you've been taking. So for example, I use a endurance kind of cycling energy fueling system. So I'm notifying them of that, but also other medications like melatonin, maybe to help me sleep, ibuprofen, just different items throughout there. So usually for a urine test, like what I had on Sunday, there's a few more questions. And at that point too, you're trying to drink water so you can make sure that you're going to be able to provide a sample to the doping control officer, or DCO for short. And from that process onwards, you're just finishing, filling out, signing a bunch of documents, and then it's time to pick out a cup. You pick out a cup, go to the washroom, the magic happens, you go back to the table, and then at that point you secure the cup, and then you're given a couple vials with different numberings, different codes on it, and that's going to be what's used for testing in the process of it. So you fill, and this is quite always an interesting part of it, is trying to put your own urine into a cup while you're doing it, usually over your own table. So it can be very nerve-wracking, and you don't want to spill it at any moment. But once that's complete, the lids are secured. You fill out a bunch more documents saying that it's been notified and it's been proceeded through the process, and then they take the vials and they leave. And usually about 12 hours or even 6 hours afterwards, you get a notification in your email providing you with that the test has been submitted. And it's one of those things where with the results, it's one of those things where no news is good news. Where if you're getting if you're getting news of the test, that usually means that they've found something in your tracks or in your system. But for myself as a cyclist, but as an athlete, I've been very lucky. I've never had any news post a test because I've had these tests about 10 or 11 times since being a cyclist.
Wow. And also, too, one point of clarification, when you said you go to the washroom, they're joining you in the washroom, right? They're not letting you out of their sight when you're actually going through the process of collecting that sample, correct?
Oh yeah, you have a buddy system going as soon as you go into that washroom, where you're going to have someone accompanying you the whole time that has to see sight of everything that's going on, whether during the urine portion of the sample and the urine portion of the test. So you have someone in your sight lines, and there's different rules and regulations if the athlete is a minor, just to make sure that they feel safe, everything is done right, and making sure that there's safe boundaries for the doping control officer, but also yourself, because that is a very compromising position to be left in, to have someone watch you go to the washroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear, it was a relatively smooth process for you with the testing. Let's move on to something a bit happier, less pee-filled. Nathan, take it away with the PSN update.
Now, the PSN update.
On a collision course, Canada and the United States face off in the final after their semi-final victories at the 2024 Para Hockey Cup. In the championship game, the captains, Josh Paul of the United States and Tyler McGregor of Canada, traded goals, leading to a 1-1 stalemate through 2 periods. In the third, the Americans tallied 3 unanswered goals, securing their 9th consecutive Para Hockey Cup with a 4-1 win. Leaving the Maritimes, we head to Europe, where Canada's Para Alpine team continued its strong start at the season-opening World Cup. Building on his silver earned earlier in the week, Kurt Otway captured victory in the men's sitting Super G. Meanwhile, Michaela Goslin reached the podium twice, winning silver in the women's standing Alpine combined and claiming bronze in the Super G. Not to be outdone, Callie Erickson and his guide Sierra Smith earned double bronze in the men's visually impaired Alpine combined and Super G. Switching from downhill to Nordic skiing, we traveled to Scandinavia, where Finland hosted the first Para-Nordic World Cup of the 2024-2025 season. The only freezing in northern Finland was the temperature, as Canada came out flying out of the gates, burning hot. Mark Arends and Natalie Wilkie both achieved podium hat-tricks. Arends won 2 golds and a silver, while Wilkie secured 2 golds and a bronze. Wilkie's victories were highlighted by a 1-2 finish with teammate Brittany Hudak, capping off a successful weekend. And that's the PSN update.
While sticking with the theme of winter sports, we turn to an interview with the Blind Hockey League's player and board member and member of the national team, Tristan Lindberg. The BHL was established last year, and they have an upcoming Carnegie Cup competition taking place in Ottawa starting December 20th. Let's welcome in Tristan to find out all about it. Tristan, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So first off, I would love to find out, how did you get started with blind hockey?
Yeah, it was about 2018 when I got introduced to blind hockey through the CNIB. They kind of just gave me a little kind of brochure about some sports for people with visual impairments. And I saw right away that blind hockey was on there. And growing up playing hockey, I was really intrigued by it at first. And then I reached out early in the year in 2019 to the team that's in Edmonton. And then, yeah, I reached out to Lauren Weber, who was the captain of the team at that time, and went out for a skate and was hooked ever since.
Tristan, thank you for coming on. How much have you personally seen the sport grow since you first started playing?
Oh, it's grown immensely. I think last year at the Canadian National Blind Hockey Tournament, they had over 200 participants, which I think is a record for them. They had, I think, 4 to 6 divisions, including children and youth, low vision, open, select, even a women's division. So it has grown and like enormously since I joined in 2018. And COVID set things back a little bit, but I think everything's kind of moving in the right direction again. And I think it's really awesome to see that growth is there.
And for you, Tristan, you're not only a blind hockey player, you're a member of the Blind Hockey League Player Association as a board member and a player and a part of the national team. A lot of hats you're wearing, but I want to talk about the BHL and how that inaugural season last year and how that went and what was it like being a part of that inaugural season?
Yeah, it was such an honor to be at that event. I think, as a whole, the event went really well. It kind of gains or got some great media attention as well as some kind of hockey attention from the, I guess, traditional hockey markets as well. We had some pretty big names that were interested in the event, so that was really, really awesome to see, which I think will just help grow the sport. And then from the hockey side, I was fortunate to play in the games, and it was a really, really fun and fast-paced and competitive event as well. So I'm looking at the same thing coming up here.
Tristan, for a lot of our listeners and viewers that maybe don't know much about blind hockey, what makes it different than regular ice hockey, and how does the classification system work in blind hockey?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few obvious adaptations that we need. We use a quite a bit larger puck. I believe it's 5 inches in diameter roughly, and then 2 inches thick. It's made of metal as well, and it's hollow, and it has 8 ball bearings in it, so it rattles when it's moving around the ice, so that people can track it audibly rather than with with their eyes. Pardon me. And then we do have a couple in-game differences as well. There's called a one pass rule. So once you cross the offensive zone blue line, you do have to make one clean pass before you can shoot. Once you do make that clean pass, there is a very high-pitched whistle that gets sound different to like the stoppage whistle. And it just kind of indicates that clean pass has been made. And then it kind of also lets the goalies know that a shot could be coming. Our goalies in blind hockey are blindfolded and have less than 1% vision, sometimes no vision at all. So it's just to kind of help them out as well. And then another main one too is our goalie nets actually are a foot shorter than a traditional hockey net, so they're 3 feet tall. That also just helps give the goalies a bit of a more level playing field, because once that puck is in the air, it's kind of like a flying saucer. All of the ball bearings kind of fall to one side of the puck, and it doesn't make a ton of noise when it's in the air. So by shortening that net, it just kind of evens up the playing field, like I said. And then with that classification system, so within blind hockey, for international classification, there's 3 categories. There's B3, B2, and B1. And B3 is your, I guess, highest level of vision. It's 10% vision, and then B2 is 5% and under, and then B1 is 1% and under.
And for you, Tristan, you mentioned that the BHL playing in that first season, it was a very fast-paced game. Can you talk a bit about some of the differences that you kind of felt playing as part of that league to some of the other blind hockey games and events that you had taken part in the past?
Yeah, for sure. I think on a whole, I I think the hockey players within that specific event, um, I guess they try and pick the most competitive players, so it's just a little bit of a different feel. Some people, which there's no problem with at all, but they're there more for leisure and fun, where some people are really into the competitiveness. So there was definitely a lot of passion on the ice for sure. Um, and then too, just I think the speed and intensity on the ice again, it was really, really high, and people were out there to, show what the sport is. And like I said, there were some pretty big figures in the arena watching, so we wanted to showcase the sport as best we could. So there was a lot of hard work and effort going into those games.
What challenges are you facing right now with this new league starting out? Is there anything you're really excited for with the tournament coming up in Ottawa and possibly going into the new year in 2025?
We're excited for this event. Again, we're really grateful that Hockey Canada has helped us out and been able to help us put this event on at the World Juniors in Ottawa. I think it's gonna open up a lot of eyes and hopefully get a lot more eyes on the sport. Um, in terms of challenges for the BHL, I think just as a whole, we're really, new and fresh to this whole organizational thing. So I think just um, taking the time to really get our processes and policies in order, which is, some of us are new to, so like myself. So just taking the time to do stuff like that properly takes a lot more time than I ever realized. So um yeah, just stuff like that. And then for 2025 and beyond, I guess we'll have to wait and see. There's a few things in the pipeline, but nothing confirmed yet. So we'll have to wait and see on those ones.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep tabs on the latest news and happenings in the world of blind hockey. And speaking of the Carnegie Cup, which is kicking off in Ottawa on December 20th, you mentioned how with the BHL you had a chance to kind of display and showcase blind hockey for some kind of people and members of the hockey world who may not be exposed or have familiarity with blind hockey. This is another opportunity to do that. Why is it so important to get the game out there to hockey lovers who may not have come across it in the past?
It's just so important because people out there, and I was one of them before I ever, started having troubles with my vision. I never knew that there was blind hockey out there, and there have been teams like the Ice Owls in Toronto that have been around since the 70s, or Montreal wasn't too far behind them. And, I was born in the late 90s, so I had no clue, and they were already around for a long time. So I think just getting the word out to those fans that maybe don't know about it, because maybe they know someone too that, has some visual troubles, or, is going through a bit of change in their vision, and they played hockey growing up, or they just want an activity to do, and maybe they grew up loving hockey, or they just really like that team aspect of sport and camaraderie. So I think it's, yeah, like you said, really, really cool opportunity to kind of get it out there to more eyes and ears, and again, hopefully just continue to spread that word and really show that hockey kind of is for everyone.
With the tournament in 2023 at the Canadian Tire Centre in Ottawa, having that chance to play on an NHL rink, but also be able to go to St. Louis and other events across North America, is there a dream rink that you would love to play on one day?
Oh, I think it'd be cool to play on any of the NHL ice surfaces, to be honest with you. But I mean, I'm a Alberta boy, so I think it would be really cool to go play in the new arena at Edmonton Rogers Place. So, yeah, I'd have to say that one for me. Or there's a few in the States that I think would be really cool. Like, I think the United Center is where the Chicago Blackhawks play. Um, or even maybe the Garden in Boston, stuff like that. They're kind of more iconic venues for sure.
And for yourself, having played in a lot of different places, both in Canada and internationally, what is the vibe like for some of these different communities you go into? Like, is there a kind of pocket of the country that is really embraced blind hockey and has really been at the forefront in showing support for the game?
You know what? I think I can't speak too much for the States. I know it is growing a lot there, and they actually have, I think, more blind hockey programs across the States than we do. They're obviously a lot larger of a country than us, but I think just in any of the provinces that do have teams, those little areas like Vancouver or Edmonton or Toronto, or I think there's even programs starting to pop up in Saskatchewan and Regina as well as Saskatoon. So I think wherever it's popped up, it's starting to show up in a big way, and people that get introduced to the sport often are really like myself, get kind of hooked on it, and again, it just kind of brings them back to those values that they like, teamwork, camaraderie, and stuff like that. So it's really starting to, like we said, grow. And I think that, yeah, just the awareness.
Well, and last question for you, Tristan. This is something we like to ask all our different kind of athletes that come on, and especially those who have been involved in sports in different capacities. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of blind hockey? This may be a tough one. The sport is still growing. It's still developing itself. But if you had to pick four players from the past, the present, nationally, internationally, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of blind hockey?
You know what? That's a great question. I think the first person that comes to mind for me is Mark DeMontis. I'm sure for a lot of people he would be the first one that comes to mind. He started this whole thing, I think it was roughly 10 years ago now, where he rollerbladed across Canada to raise money to start the organization that has turned into Canadian Blind Hockey. So he for sure. Francois Beauregard as well. He played on the international team and has been a, integral part of growing the sport in the States as well as in Canada. He goes to, numerous events a year and is always dedicated and is, on and off the ice as anything. So, he would be another one. And then I think I'd have to also throw it down to a few people down in the States. I've started to work with a gentleman named Dan Schramm, who's from Colorado. He's part of this BHL board, and he's been really, um, again, big key part of helping us grow this sport from the BHL standpoint. I think he's done a fantastic job so far. He's the chair of our committee there. So I'd say Dan as well. Either Matt Morrow or Luca DeMontis, either of those guys would be in that last spot there. I know Matt got actually inducted into our Blind Hockey Hall of Fame. So as a builder of the sport, so he's been really, really important too to help this sport grow in not just the national team and international game, but as well as in the like children and youth and the low vision and development programs as well. So without those programs, we can't really feed the open divisions and the select divisions. So I would say Matt and Luca as well. He's been fantastic with all the same stuff. The kids, he's really, really awesome with the kids groups as well as, just the whole umbrella of, blind hockey. And personally, he helps us a ton with the national team side of stuff. So I've gotten to know Luca a little bit, and yeah, I can't thank him enough for what he's done for us on the national side, but as well as just the entire sport.
Well, that is certainly a great Mount Rushmore you erected for blind hockey. Tristan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
No problem, and thank you guys so much for having me on.
And that was Tristan Lindberg from the BHL. I loved his response on the Mount Rushmore question, Nathan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on the show, and we're going to have to wait until Friday to be able to discuss things again. But thank you for joining me, and thank you at home for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.